It seems that the first episode of HBO's new House of the Dragon has been a massive hit and left viewers with a lot to think about as we wait for the next episode. The main thing being, how will the reveal of Aegon the Conqueror's A Song of Ice and Fire Dragon Dream prophecy impact the rest of the show, and more importantly for us book nerds, the last two books? And while that is intriguing, what really had me thinking at the end of the episode was, what happened in the brothel on the Street of Silk? The way the show presents this scene, the part with Daemon giving a toast in the brothel is intercut with Otto reporting on the event to the king and council later on. And right when it seems that Daemon is about to say the infamous line, it instead cuts to Otto telling it to Viserys. By doing this, we don't actually see Daemon say the line, and he technically never actually admits to it later on. When asked by Viserys, he just says, "We must all mourn in our own way, your grace."
The heir for a day. Did you say it?
We must all mourn in our own way, your grace.
And even if Daemon did say it, we aren't given the exact context. Because of this, I've seen a lot of discussion around this scene in the fandom and amongst my friends. The three main leading theories I've seen seem to be: Theory 1, Daemon straight up said it because he was happy to be heir again, and he's kind of a prick. This is likely, and I do think he did say it for a reason I'll explain later on. Theory 2, Daemon did reference Balon, his dead nephew, as the heir for a day, but he did it in some sort of genuine way. I can see an argument for this based on Daemon's tone in the brothel, and him telling Viserys that he was mourning in his own way, as we talked about earlier. The third theory, Daemon never said it. He said something nice about his nephew, and Otto just made it all up to make sure Daemon wouldn't be named heir. This is possible, and the way these two scenes are cut together, it almost seems like the show wants us to question if it was all just made up by Otto. In this video, I'll present a fourth theory, that Daemon said it, but he did it on purpose, or more accurately, that he did it with purpose. What do I mean by this? Well, when Daemon toasted the heir for a day, he did it knowing that word would get back to Viserys. I know what you're thinking. What the hell are you talking about? Why the hell would Daemon want word to get back to Viserys? Why would he want him to hear something like that? I'll get back to that in a moment. But first, let's take a look at everything we learned about Daemon in this first episode. Number 1, he's bold. We're first introduced to him sitting on the Iron Throne, which even Sir Harold Westerling is surprised by.
God be good.
It's all right, sir.
Some might argue that this shows more ambition than anything. I would disagree. This scene is clearly meant to parallel a scene from Season 1 where Ned walks into the throne to find Jaime's hidden at the foot of it, and that scene is meant to make us think about the time that Ned walked in on Jaime sitting on the throne. And Jaime isn't an ambitious character, but he is bold. The next thing we learn about Daemon, he loves Rhaenyra. In this first scene where he's sitting on the Iron Throne, he talks to Rhaenyra, clearly shows affection for her, and gives her an expensive gift. The third thing we learn is he visits brothels, or at least a brothel, frequently, and has a lady friend, Massaria, who runs the whorehouse. Most likely the same whorehouse where the event in question takes place. Next, he likes to fuck with Otto. We see him doing this on 2 occasions, in council and in tourney.
Your own lady wife passed recently. Did she not?
5. He isn't really worried about honor. We see him deliberately trip a horse in front of everyone in the stands. Next, we know he learns that Rhaenyra doesn't feel loved by her father. She clearly confesses this to him at the funeral. Next, we learn that he's pretty sneaky and probably pretty smart. He's seen spying on the council meeting where they're talking about who's going to be the heir, the one that's all about succession. And if you think about it, he probably knew what this council meeting was going to be about. And lastly, he also feels underappreciated by his brother, so probably can sympathize with Rhaenyra. We get this from his conversation in the last scene. You never loved me, you never named me his hand.
You've only ever tried to send me away to the Vale, to the City Watch. Anywhere but by your side. 10 years you've been king, and yet not once have you asked me to be your hand.
Next I'm going to read an excerpt from The Rogue Prince. It's a 1-paragraph description of Daemon Targaryen. This is what the book tells us on the first page. Over the centuries, House Targaryen has produced both great men and monsters. Prince Daemon was both. In his day there was not a man so admired, so beloved, or so reviled in all of Westeros. He was made of light and dark in equal parts. To some he was a hero, to other he was the blackest of villains. No true understanding of that most tragic bloodletting known as the Dance of the Dragons is possible without a consideration of the crucial role played before and during the conflict by this rogue prince. So what was I talking about when I said that Daemon said the heir for the day on purpose with the intention of Viserys finding out? Well, as you heard in that description from The Rogue Prince, Daemon is described as a very grey character, being a hero to some and the blackest of villains to others, both beloved and reviled. However, when you go on to read the rest of The Rogue Prince, you get way more villain than hero and way more vile than love from the character Prince Daemon. This leads many of us book readers to wonder, what is so good about him? Well, I think some of those things we learned about Daemon in episode 1 could explain it. The short answer, why would Daemon want Viserys to hear the news? Well, because he wanted to give the throne to his beloved niece, making this act both loving and vile, making him both hero and villain. While we're on the topic, I will quickly mention that I think this shot of Daemon on the throne, his face half in the light and half in the dark, while he's wearing this black and white outfit, is a nod to the "he was made of light and dark in equal parts," part of the famous Daemon quote I read a minute ago. Now, on to why I believe Daemon said it on purpose. First, the reason I think he did say it at all, besides him not denying it when asked by Viserys, the dialogue we do get from Daemon in the scene fits too perfectly with the words, "the heir for a day." I have a hard time believing that if Otto made something up, it would have sounded that poetic when replaced with what Daemon actually said. The dialogue we get leading up to the missing quote is,
King and council have long rued my position as next in line for the throne.
But dream and pray as they all might, it seems I'm not so easily replaced. The gods give just as the gods take away. To the king's son.
"The heir for a day." See what I mean? It just fits too well that I think Daemon had to have said it. Okay, but would he really have known that it would get back to Viserys? I think he had to have known. First of all, he was getting spied on in this same brothel early in the episode, and while he might not have known about it, it wasn't very subtle, and Daemon doesn't seem very stupid. Secondly, during the event in question, he had rented out the entire brothel, and it was full of gold cloaks and whores. And Daemon happens to be the commander of the gold cloaks, and his lady friend Mysaria happens to be the madam of the brothel we're in. So, it seems like they should know most of the people in this brothel. Now, let's look at Fire and Blood and see what that tells us about this scene. Thus did matters stand in King's Landing, late in the year 105, when Queen Aemma was brought to bed in Maegor's holdfast and died whilst giving birth to the son that Viserys Targaryen had desired for so long. The boy, named Balon after the king's father, survived her only a day, leaving the king and court bereft, save perhaps for Prince Daemon, who was observed in a brothel on the Street of Silk, making drunken japes with his highborn cronies about the heir for a day. When word got back to the king, legend says that it was the whore sitting on Daemon's lap who informed on him, but evidence suggests it was actually one of his drinking companions, a captain in the gold cloaks, eager for advancement. Viserys became livid. His grace had finally had a surfeit of his ungrateful brother and his ambitions. So, Fire and Blood tells us that it was one of the gold cloak drinking companions, or one of the whores who informed on him. So it seems like if Daemon really wanted this to get back, he could have just had one of his friends, or one of Mysaria's workers, inform on him, and probably make a buck for doing it as well. On top of all of this, when you really look at the scene, the way that Mysaria and this gold cloak captain seem to be quieting down the crowd in order for this to happen, makes it seem like Daemon kind of had this plan between the three of them all along. Maybe I'm reading a little bit too far into it on that one, but I don't know, something's fishy about this. Okay, so hopefully I've at least partially convinced you that Daemon had the means to, and could have set this up and spread the news to the council if he wanted to. The next question is, why would he do this? And yes, I already mentioned that I think it's because he loves his niece and wants to give the heirship to her, but I haven't supported this claim yet. Let's do that now. To do that, let's take a look at the two scenes that Daemon is in immediately before the heir for the day scene. First, as I talked about earlier, Daemon comforts Rhaenyra at her mother's funeral. And at this time, he learns that she feels unloved from her father because of her gender. What she says is, "I wonder if during those few hours my brother lived, my father finally found happiness." To me, this clearly shows she feels unloved. Daemon responds by saying, "Your father needs you, more now than he ever has." And she finishes with, "I will never be a son." Here Daemon, as well as us the viewers, learn that Rhaenyra wants to feel wanted and needed and loved by her father. This is something Daemon relates with, as we see later in the conversation at the end. The very next scene is the council scene where Otto brings up the succession right away. First I would ask, why would Daemon decide to attend this council in secret? And while we don't know for sure, the only thing that makes sense to me is that he knew what the conversation would be about. The succession. The heir just died, the wife just died, the king has no way to make a new heir, so there's going to be a big debate on if Daemon's it or not. He wanted to see how that conversation would go down. Daemon doesn't speak in this scene, but I interpreted one of his reactions in a way that makes me believe he doesn't want the throne. Specifically, take this bit here, where Viserys is saying that Daemon doesn't want it.
Daemon has ambition, yes, but not for the throne. He lacks the patience for it.
Now, some people I've talked to thought that this was more of a Viserys is so dumb, of course I want the throne look. But the way I took this, it was more of a happy, man, my brother knows me so well, fuck you, Otto, little smirk, you know? Viserys then ends this meeting freaking out about how his small council of crows that have come to feast on the corpses of his dead wife and child. I only bring up that quote because it's a cool Feast for Crows reference, which is the 4th book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series. I don't know, I just don't believe that after hearing this freak out from his brother, who Daemon genuinely cares about, that he then went and rented out a brothel to join this so-called Feast of Crows by openly mocking his brother's dead baby. What he did is the exact thing that Viserys just got so pissed about, which makes it the perfect thing to say if you're trying to throw a succession race. So, the Rhaenyra conversation at the funeral gave him motive, spying on the council chamber gave him the opportunity, and his position of the commander of the city watch and his connection with Mysaria and the brothel gave him the ability to set it all up. One final thing that popped out to me is kind of symbolic, and I'm not a symbolism guy, so I might be reading way too far into this, is the part at the beginning where Daemon's giving Rhaenyra the necklace. The necklace is made of Valyrian steel, which is unusual since the metal is so uncommon and so useful for weapons. One would think Valyrian steel jewelry is pretty rare. The only other mention of Valyrian steel jewelry I can think of is Aegon the Conqueror's crown, which is described as a circlet of Valyrian steel set with big square-cut rubies. Now this necklace doesn't have big square-cut rubies, but it does have rubies. So as Daemon gives her this piece of jewelry that's made of the same material as Aegon's crown, he eventually ends up giving her the heirship, whether intentionally or not. So, I don't know. Symbolism, you tell me. The last thing to talk about for this theory is, why wouldn't Daemon just say, I don't want it? And without making too many Season 8 jokes, a ruler who tells the people that he doesn't want to rule really isn't going to change too many people's minds. We can call this the Jon Snow problem.
I don't want it. I never have.
But for real, what I'm suggesting is that what Daemon did by making open mockery of his brother's dead baby is a way more guaranteed way to make sure that Rhaenyra gets the heirship than just telling everyone to give it to her. So in conclusion, Daemon set up a public event where he could get seen by many people. At that event, he refers to the king's dead son as the heir for the day, and then he has the gold cloaks and mysterious sex workers report on him to the king's council. He did this as a way to ensure his niece Rhaenyra not only gets to be the heir, but also gets to develop a relationship with her father, the king, who she feels doesn't love her. As a wise man once said, that's all I have. Though I'd like to say that I'm probably wrong about half of this stuff. And that's what's great about A Song of Ice and Fire. It keeps us constantly guessing. I hope this video has opened your mind to new possibilities, and most of all, I hope it's been fun. If you need more to think about, who poisoned the honeyed locusts?